Get ready for the brand new season of the Dr. Phil Show. The #1 talk show in daytime starts now.
Appreciate it. Well, it is the first show of season 11. Okay? 11 years. Come on. I could not be more excited about what we have in store for you. All year, we're going to be bringing you compelling content, exclusive interviews. We're going behind the headlines of the stories that have you captivated. And when I say we're going to get real, let me tell you, we are going to get real. If you want to know what's really going on, you are in the right house, okay? You got it? Now, I'll confess, I don't dance, I don't sing, but I can and I will help people that come here with questions that matter in their life. This is a safe place to talk about hard things. So you ready for season 11? Well, today we are starting with a Dr. Phil exclusive involving one of the most controversial, the most heated news stories of the year.
Today on the season premiere of Dr. Phil.
I am the best friend of George Zimmerman, the most hated man in America.
You've never spoken out before. Why now?
The shocking defense of Trayvon Martin's killer.
You helped him pick out the gun he killed Trayvon Martin with.
He's legally allowed to carry a weapon.
It's a neighborhood watch, not a neighborhood hunt.
A Dr. Phil exclusive.
Did he have to pull that trigger?
I believe 100% yes.
Do you think Trayvon would have killed him?
Absolutely.
This is a kid. He went to the store to get some Skittles, and he came home dead.
He shouldn't have died like that.
Trayvon's parents have questions they want answered.
Trayvon was my baby. I just want to know how to move on, how to get past the death.
It was one of the biggest news stories of the year and had the nation up in arms.
We want justice for Trayvon!
And today we have an exclusive interview that may leave you even more outraged depending on which side you're on. He's been called racist, a gun-toting vigilante, and some say the most hated man in America for shooting an unarmed teenager, Trayvon Martin. Today, for the first time, George Zimmerman's best friends, the ones who picked the gun that killed Trayvon, who kept George secretly hidden away for over a month, speak out in his defense. Now, you may think you know all there is to know about this controversy, but Mark and Sandra Osterman say they know George best and are here to set the record straight.
I am the best friend of the most hated man in America. George Zimmerman and I have known each other for 6 years.
George is the sweetest guy. He doesn't even swear in front of women.
George had pure ideals, a nobility of character that I admired. I kind of wanted to be like him. George and I went shooting together at least once every other month. I did help George Zimmerman select the firearm that he had in his possession. There is no safety on that particular weapon. The day of the shooting, George's wife, Shelley, had called me first, and she met me at the scene. When I first heard that George had shot someone else, I was extremely shocked. I know it would have been the absolute last resort.
Well, it's clear that George's best friend thinks he did the right thing. But when the media heard about a man shooting an unarmed teenager, there was outrage.
No justice.
No peace. No justice. No peace.
But a killing that has sparked outrage nationwide.
Oh, so many had to die.
The Million Hoodie March is a call for justice for Trayvon Martin, the unarmed Florida teenager shot and killed by neighborhood watch commander George Zimmerman.
The boy died, but a movement was born.
We want justice for Trayvon Martin, which means an arrest for George Zimmerman.
Even with public opinion saying George belonged in jail, Mark was determined to protect his friend, even if it meant putting his own family in danger.
When George was released from police custody, he was suffering from a severe concussion.
He was pretty badly bruised up. He had some scrapes to the back of his head. His eyes were black and blue. He had bandages over his nose. George basically looked like he had just been mugged.
We did decide to bring George Zimmerman back to my residence. George and Shelley had to hide in my home for over a month. George had a bounty placed on his life, dead or alive, for $10,000 issued by the new Black Panthers. George wanted to leave to protect us. I advised him that if someone came to my front door, they wouldn't be dealing with the firearms apprentice any longer. They better come well rested and be ready. We were going to be in this boat together, and that's what brothers do. I am 100% convinced that George Zimmerman is completely innocent. He stood his ground, and he had every right to do so.
Well, thank you guys for being here. You've never spoken out before. Why now?
We're at a rather critical junction in the case, and we're to the point to where no one else until now who hasn't been a family member of his has been able to give a perspective that we have.
Okay, and you have a very strong opinion of this, both of you do, yes. Right? Yes. And you say, and you've written a book about this actually, and the title is Defending Our Friend, the Most Hated Man in America, and it goes on to say the George Zimmerman we know. Yes. Correct? Okay. Correct. Is he the most hated man in America?
Until the next most hated man that the media wants, the new television news media wants to use, until that person comes along, I believe he is.
Okay. Yeah. And you speak with great absoluteness. You say he is in the right, he did what he was supposed to do, he stood his ground. How can you say that when you weren't there?
Great question. I have tried my best to be objective, but things that George was telling me was actually falling right in line with what evidence we did know. And it was evidence that no one else would have known, because we had him in our home. I mean, from the night of the shooting, he was in our presence.
You're in law enforcement.
I am.
And I'm not going to say any more than that.
And that reflects absolutely nothing upon any agency that I belong to. They have no impact on this whatsoever. This is completely my...
Certainly, I understand. You helped him pick out the gun...
Yes, sir.
...that he ultimately shot and killed Trayvon Martin with.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now that makes me wonder if you are now bought into a point where you say, I've got to defend the guy now because I'm in the chain here. Does that mean that you need to defend him here? Because if not, you've got some ownership in this?
From my perspective, when I look at the firearm that we chose, we went out, we selected it for what fit his budget, but also what worked best to defend yourself. There are a lot of different types of firearms you use for different purposes, but one designed for self-defense. This was the perfect weapon.
You said you picked a gun that did not have an external safety. Why is that?
If you happen to be in a face-to-face scuffle, a fight that happens to go to the ground and it's a life or death struggle, to be able to draw your weapon and then have another process involved to actually take the safety off. Many times people have been killed and have died from an attack because they would keep squeezing the trigger and not be able to deploy their...
Couldn't that also be an advantage? It seems to me to take out a step, which means a flash decision can happen without any step whatsoever.
Sure.
Let me ask you this. I've lived in neighborhoods all of my life that have had neighborhood watch programs.
Right.
And it's a neighborhood watch program, not a neighborhood hunt program, not a neighborhood vigilante program. And one of the things that in every rule that I've ever seen in any of the bylaws of our watch programs, and any that I've ever heard, is that it is watch, observe, and report, sure. And that the recommendations are, and you acknowledge it in your book, which Absolutely. Is very well articulated, you do not take a firearm on a watch
that is
when you're out working in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And here's a guy on a watch program packing a gun with no safety. It just smacks to me of Rambo macho stomping around the neighborhood with a gun. That bothers me, and I think it bothers a lot of people.
Well, I think what a lot of people maybe they don't know is on that particular night, George was not doing neighborhood watch function. He was actually on his way out of his home to run a personal errand. And if you know George the way we know George, he carries his gun with him always.
He's legally allowed to have it on him.
Okay, you can be legally licensed to carry a gun, but if you're a kindergarten teacher, that doesn't give you the right to take it into your classroom. Just because you have a permit to carry it doesn't mean that you are allowed to carry it in every situation and scenario.
For us to know him as well as we do, for him to have pulled it out in any other circumstance other than absolute life or death is unfathomable for us.
You say that you told him that there are two reasons to carry that gun all the time. And one was so kids don't find it
if it's on you.
And play with it. Isn't it ironic that he wound up killing a kid with it? I mean, that kind of... All right, we got to take a break. Coming up, why Mark says George needed to shoot Trayvon. And later, one of my guests breaks her silence for the first time about her relationship with Trayvon. We'll be right back.
Trayvon was a sweet boy, a kind, gentle person, and for him to hurt someone, never.
George Zimmerman is behind bars.
Arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin.
I'm praying that he's convicted.
I would consider George Zimmerman and I brothers. I carry a firearm at all times, and I urged George to carry his everywhere that he went. And when someone attacks you, as I had explained to George on many occasions, the number one rule is to retain the weapon in the holster until you feel your life is in danger. The moment that you feel you are going to die, do everything in your power to protect yourself. If it means firing to remove that person as a threat, it has to be done.
Okay, we're back. We're talking about one of the biggest stories in America, and that is the shooting and killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman. Are you proud of his conduct that night? Did he do the right thing?
There is no winners. This is the most horrible tragedy that could have ever come from this, and there is no upside to this. From what George told me, and that's, he believes he would not be alive today had he not done that.
All right, well, let me go through this a little bit here from just a timeline standpoint. We know that at 6:40, Trayvon goes to the convenience store. He's going for Skittles and iced tea. 7-Eleven, George calls police to report a suspicious-looking person. He tells the dispatcher he is following Martin after he begins to run, and the dispatcher says, "We don't need you to do that." Now, you say he wasn't following him at the time.
Well,
in your book, you say that he wasn't following.
There's a twist kind of here in how the verbiage went. George had said that he was told, do you still see him? At one point earlier in the 911 call, he said, "Do you still see him?" He says, "No, I don't." Then the dispatcher had said something along the lines of, "Well, do you still want us to send a police officer?" And he said, "Yes, at least for having me give you the description and so on and so forth in case there's any incidents." So George took that as, if I don't still see him, they may not send the police officer. And
did he tell you this?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That night?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
He got out of his vehicle, and that was for two purposes: to attempt to get a visual on Trayvon so he could direct the police officer to him to interview him, or to find an actual street sign where he could direct the police officer to in case he didn't see him.
In your book, you say he was looking for a street sign so he would know what corner he was on to tell the police to come.
Absolutely, absolutely. So he got there, but he lost visual sight, and while you're looking for the street sign, he's looking for Trayvon.
Well, a minute later, Trayvon's girlfriend says that Martin said a man, quote, was watching him, so he put his hoodie on. 7:13, Martin's girlfriend claims she heard him saying, "What are you following me for?" Martin's girlfriend says the line then went dead. 7:13 to 7:16, George tells the officials that he had lost sight of Martin and was returning to his truck to meet police when he was attacked by Martin.
Correct.
So I'm trying to figure out, was he looking for a street sign, was he trying to maintain visual, or was he returning to his truck when he was ambushed? Because that seems to be three not necessarily exclusive of one another's stories.
Right. It probably happened in some order.
Yeah, you think it's probably all three of those things.
Yes, I believe so.
At 7:16, roughly, he shoots him.
Correct.
First of at least 7 911 calls from neighbors. First officer arrives on the scene, and he's pronounced dead at 7:30. When did you talk to George the first time?
For me, it was when he was released from the Sanford Police Department at about 3 or 3:30 in the morning.
And you talked to him before that?
I talked to him the next morning. Mark met with Shelley and, sat with her during the long process of George being interviewed. And they came to our home that night, and the next morning after I dropped my daughter up at school, he was at my kitchen table, and I spoke with him then.
You took him into your home because he feared retaliation if he went to his home, because this began to explode almost immediately.
Well, not before the first 3 or 4 days. That's when the local news media had picked up the story. What we didn't want was any further escalation of any kind of violence in any other way. I don't know how to describe how heartbroken and devastated he was that this had happened. I said to him, I said, the last place you need to be is home, worrying if someone's going to come to your house and want to confront you about what had happened.
It clearly puts you guys at risk,
right.
And your daughter has had reactions to this. But something bothered me psychologically, and we actually had it on tape. You said, he's at my house now, and if they show up over here, they're not dealing with an apprentice shooter anymore. They better be well rested.
That's right.
I mean,
yes, sir.
That sounded to me like very provocative statement, like
yes,
it's almost daring somebody to come over there and Billy Badass is going to shoot him. I mean, that's just psychologically.
Absolutely, I understand. I'm a real kind of basic, kind of simple kind of guy when it comes to most things in life. All I know is when a threat to George and Shelley, which I consider family, and my wife and my child, if someone is making the threats of, regardless of what the evidence says, regardless of what we want to believe or any other statement, if we find out where he lives, hey, he may be at this residence, send the new Black Panthers, an armed terrorist group, over to their house so they can deal with him and they can go ahead and kill him. The dead or alive bounty we took very serious.
Yeah.
It was deadly serious that at any time someone's going to discover where he lives and he's going to come to my home.
And what you're referring to, if people don't know, is it's been reported.
Correct.
I don't know that it's been confirmed. It's been reported that the new Black Panther Party had put out a bounty on him,
correct,
dead or alive, $10,000.
I mean, there were signs up in our local city that said, wanted, dead or alive. I mean, you know, this isn't the Wild Wild West.
Is he a racist? Is he a racist?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
Is he a cowboy vigilante?
Oh, absolutely not. He's a peaceful person, a loving person. That's why when we heard this story that had happened, I have other friends that I would have said, well, you know, I'm just not sure whether it was, you know, something they might have done or might not have done. When it came to George, it was more of a shock to us because the last thing he would have done was do anything.
But you say that he is a nice, loving, sweet guy. I don't know him, so I've not met him. But we, as many people, have researched this guy. Since '04, he's called the police over 46 times.
Right.
Yes.
In '05, he was arrested for resisting an officer with violence and battery of a law enforcement officer, both third-degree felonies, which were ultimately reduced, so apparently pled down, and then ultimately dropped completely because he went to alcohol education program.
Anger management.
Yeah. So that's not who you're describing. You're describing, this is a peachy guy. He's loving. He's caring. He's a gentle spirit. In '05, he apparently is resisting an officer with violence and battery of a law enforcement officer.
Well,
in '07, domestic abuse report filed by ex-fiancé. She requested a restraining order, as did he, against her. In '08, George's former Arab-American work colleague complained formally alleging serial hazing by George across several months.
I never heard that.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll tell you about it. He said it included pranks and ethnic jokes, and that he impersonated a terrorist character. That doesn't square up with the George you described? I'm not saying people don't change.
Sure.
But I'm saying it doesn't square up with the guy you're describing.
Well, the incident of the battery of a law enforcement officer, as George described that to me, was they were plainclothes police officers near a college campus, and when a friend of his was being manhandled by these plainclothes police officers, he got involved. He was grabbing people, pulling them off of him, and they turned to him and they immediately arrested him for battery on a law enforcement officer. And when you put your hands on him...
But it is interesting that he's in another fight on the street.
Absolutely.
And here he is in another fight on the street. This time he's armed and somebody gets dead.
Absolutely. He and I had talked about that, and that was one of the topics that he had gotten into a place in his life to where he said, you know what, I don't want to frequent like on Friday nights or Saturday nights going out to clubs with my friends and such, and I don't wish to do all this anymore. He stopped doing these things, and his life changed completely. He started saving money, he started doing, and with that money, him and Shelley have done nothing but mentor inner city youth and be the big brother and big sister of those people.
Were you a role model for him?
He says so. I don't know how qualified I am to be a role model for anybody.
And you said that you would die for the Zimmermans.
Absolutely.
Even if it meant just protecting him for another week or another month, is what you said, actually.
Absolutely. But I wouldn't lie for him. That will never come across me. Virtue, honor, these things I hold so dear in my life.
In all of your mentoring, modeling, and talking to George Zimmerman, did you ever tell him 10 things to do, 3 things to do, 5 things to do before you have to draw that weapon?
It was never a breakdown like that. We never really had a
I see at the shooting range, what I'm saying is, did you ever say, stay out of situations where you don't get painted into a corner and have to draw that gun?
Always.
Don't follow somebody if you're not supposed to. Watch and observe. Don't engage. And number one self-defense, like Michael used to tell me, number one self-defense, boy, is run. Run. Get the hell away. Just don't be macho about this. He said, if they've got a gun, a knife, a bat, or a rock, or they just look bad, run. Did you ever have those kind of conversations with him, that it is a failure to pull that gun and pull the trigger? Did you ever have those kind of conversations with him, that it is a failure to pull that gun and pull the trigger?
Well, something close to that, I would probably say. We went over many things. George, at the time, when he turned around and was face-to-face with Trayvon, according to what he told us, there is no time. It was a matter of we're within an arm's reach of each other. I was struck in the face. I fell down on my back, and in no time, his knees are up here by my ribs, and he's pummeling me. There was no option. When things happen in a split second, according to what he told me, there was no time to think, to go through a decision process. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just don't have that time.
Was this an all or none situation? Did he have to pull that trigger?
I believe 100% yes. And I'll tell you why. When your head has been bashed on the ground and you're close to blacking out and you have the concussion that he had, there's that thought process of, I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to strike someone with it. If there was another way to preserve Trayvon's life, George would have taken it without question. Without question.
And I think it's important to say also that George did yell for help. In his mind, he said he thought that the police were on the scene and they were looking for him. So he was trying to yell for help as loudly as he possibly could so that the police would be able to find him and yank Trayvon off, and then everything, you know, works out a different way.
He also was yelling to people directly to get them. He was seeing people.
And you know, there are witnesses that say it was Trayvon that was yelling for help, not George.
Correct. I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Not long ago, George Zimmerman appeared during an interview with Fox's Sean Hannity. Now, during that interview, George gave a controversial response to one of the questions, and Mark has asked for a chance to clarify what he believes George really meant. Now, here's how this happened. Hannity, do you feel you wouldn't be here for this interview if you didn't have that gun? Zimmerman, no, sir. Hannity, you feel you would not be here? Zimmerman, I feel it was all God's plan, and for me to second guess it or judge it. Hannity interrupts. Is there anything you might do differently in retrospect now that the time has passed a little bit? Zimmerman, no, sir. What do you want to say?
It was clear to us what he might have meant. George has said to us, I've heard him say the God's plan thing, and that was, God must have a plan for me to have allowed me not to have died that day. So that was, I could see easily how that could be turned into, well, was it God's plan that Trayvon perished that night? Absolutely not. That's the opposite of what we believe he would have meant at all.
Anywhere in your mind, under any theory at which you would say it's even a possibility that he made a mistake?
I can't.
Okay, all right, then let me ask it this way. If he had this to do over again, would you advise him differently?
With a crystal ball, I would have probably advised him that your thought process of getting out of the vehicle, even though he may have misinterpreted what the dispatcher was trying to relay to him, and that is, if you don't still see him, we may not even send an officer, or if you don't see him, let's just let this one go. So he got out of his vehicle to see where he was supposed to be, to see where if he could make eye contact with Trayvon. So I would have said to him, under no circumstances would you get out of your vehicle. That's not your job to get out of your vehicle and put yourself in harm's way that way.
So that was a mistake, to get out of the vehicle?
Not necessarily. In his opinion, he thought the dispatcher wanted him to maintain eye contact.
Well, that's not what the dispatcher said.
Well, right.
The dispatcher didn't give any advice other than, we don't need you to follow him.
Right, after he had already gotten out of the vehicle.
She said exactly the opposite.
Yeah, he got out of the vehicle, right.
So if he's hearing what isn't said, he's also contradicting what he was told. We don't need you to do that.
Right, and he turned around and went back to his vehicle.
Yeah,
tried to go back to his vehicle. He said okay.
Okay, and he
closed his phone, he put it in his pocket, and as he turned around to return to his vehicle, Trayvon was within an arm's reach of him. And that's where the conflict happened.
Oh, we've got to take a break. Coming up, I'm going to add somebody to this conversation. We'll be right back.
Parents of Trayvon Martin demanded justice for their son, shot to death near their Orlando area home in a killing that has sparked outrage nationwide.
My son does not deserve to die.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes. That's my baby. That's my son that was yelling. He was murdered.
Well, we've seen Trayvon's biological parents in the news, but my next guest says his death is affecting her just as deeply. Today, Trayvon's stepmom is breaking her silence for the first time and telling her side of the story. Take a look.
Trayvon's parents divorced when he was a baby. I've been with Trayvon's father for 14 years, and we've been married 7 years. Trayvon spent time at my home. If he's not listening to his iPod, he's on the computer or watching TV. Trayvon was a sweet boy, a kind, gentle person, and for him to hurt someone, never.
What do you want to say to these folks that are defending the man that shot and killed Trayvon?
I understand that he's your friend. And you guys, I mean, there's no way you can believe that story. That story has so many holes in it. And you sit up here and you were proud. I picked that gun out for him. I did this, I did that. Why would you even want people to know that you did that? I mean, it is so... I mean, I would never want to have anything to do with that. I know he's your friend and you love him and whatever, but that don't mean he's not a liar.
Well,
you believe what he's saying to you?
I'm not being proud of the fact that we had purchased that gun together, and our hearts are absolutely breaking for what had happened, for this to ever have happened to begin with. We believe George. We believe that the evidence that has come out supports what he was saying, and I'm hoping that people will reserve judgment until a trial until actual evidence is actually compared to each other.
Well, you haven't. You already say he's innocent.
I believe that. I have a unique perspective, having George in my home, that he was the one that was screaming for help at the top of his lungs and fearing for his life.
Okay, you believe it was him? You heard the tape?
I heard the tape.
911, do you need police, fire, medical?
Maybe both. I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming outside. I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on.
I was
That
in
is
the
not a
living
grown
room.
man screaming.
Well,
I was in with his wife when she heard that for the first time.
Okay.
And I am 100% certain that that was her husband screaming for
Because she
his
told you
life.
that.
she broke
Because I
down
heard it
inconsolable.
myself.
How are you going to be getting your head banged and you screaming and you getting the gun at the same time?
Well, my perspective would be let's let any analyzation of the tapes show who it actually was. I wasn't
there. I can
there.
tell you this much. He put his hands on him. He was defending himself. Okay, if Zimmerman never put his hands on him, this wouldn't have been, we wouldn't be here right now. Right now. And you guys sitting back and say he was defending himself from what?
From an attack.
From attack. He attacked Trayvon.
How would you know? We weren't there. I want the evidence from witnesses to actually come out and go.
You're right. He got out of his car. He pursued him. He could have stayed in his car. Wherever he was going, you say he wasn't on duty.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, he lost sight. Leave.
You cannot dispute the fact that she raises very good and valid points. Here you've got a guy, if he isn't carrying a gun, then nobody gets shot. Okay, if he doesn't get out of his truck, nobody gets shot. If he behaves consistently with the charter of the Neighborhood Watch Program, which is to observe and report, nobody gets shot. This is a kid. This is a kid. It's a child. Right. He went to the store to get some Skittles, and he came home dead. Okay? That's not okay. I mean,
sure.
So he didn't approach the truck. He didn't knock on the window and say, "What are you doing following me?" and reach in and grab him. He had to get out of the truck and go after the boy. Right. Now, you have to acknowledge that, or you lose all credibility.
Of course.
Yeah, he obviously got out of the truck.
Right.
I think the misconception is
had he never gotten out of the truck, this wouldn't have happened, correct?
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's that simple. That's the mistake. That's the first link in the chain. You said yourself, you told him to do this over, you told him to stay in the truck.
Sure.
We've got to take a break. There's been a lot of debate over whether or not Trayvon was big enough or strong enough to suffocate and kill George with his bare hands. Now, what Mark has to say about that next, we'll be right back.
George has never been in a fistfight. He's worked in an office environment all of his adult life, and George was not a muscle-bound kind of man. Trayvon was physically strong and had an athlete's physique. He could have been more physically capable than George Zimmerman.
Not true. Have you seen Trayvon?
I said could. And
Trayvon was very skinny. And when I say skinny, no muscles.
Your passion shows how much you loved him. My heart is breaking. Like, I don't know how to...
He killed him. He got him down and he killed him. I don't want to hear about he was big enough to subdue him and all this and that. Zimmerman was big enough to defend himself from Trayvon. This is a man. We're not talking about a little boy. We're talking about Zimmerman is a man.
It's my wish that he could have.
Zimmerman could have gotten him off of him. Anybody can say whatever they want to say. He did not have to kill him. He did not have to kill him. He didn't. He did not have to shoot him.
All of us.
He shouldn't have died like that.
Are feeling an emotional impact from this that will last the rest of our lives. I am so sorry that you had to go through this, and I don't know if you could have.
Trayvon was 6 foot tall, right?
Yes.
Okay, and was he a violent young man?
No, Trayvon was not violent.
You say in the tape that George wasn't very athletic, so you think he would be easy for a young athletic?
That is a possibility. That's exactly what George is thinking. And George said to us, when he struck me in the nose and broke my nose, He saw stars. He didn't know who he was. He just knew that he was bigger than him, taller than him, and he was striking him, and he was losing consciousness.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you believe if he hadn't had that gun and shot Trayvon, that George Zimmerman would be dead today?
I do.
Absolutely.
So you think Trayvon would have killed him?
Absolutely.
I think so. It's possible. I do, and I'll tell you why.
Are you serious?
If I can have one moment. George, the injuries that he had to his head could not be sustained for any period of time without either becoming unconscious or dying. He said, I'm blacking out. I feel I'm going to die. And he told the police that. He said that in a lie detector test, all of which they have. They've connected all this together, and from George's perspective, he felt, I am going to die.
All right, we are out of time. I wish we could spend more time on this. I said to you that when we came to the end of this, I was going to ask you if there was anything we haven't talked about, anything you hadn't gotten out. You wanted to set the record straight and tell his side of the story, and I feel like you've done that.
Correct. Terrible fury was felt for George because of the television media that wanted, it seemed like they were reality TV with sponsors. All they wanted was to make it so sensational and so outrageous. To me, I understand why people have gotten so ferocious in their defense.
So you're trying to unring that bell.
Oh my gosh.
But you understand, at the core of this story, this child here went to get some Skittles and got shot dead. So no matter how much you sensationalize that, at the core of it, you've got some very heinous events here. And I'm not saying that things don't get sensationalized in the media, but I think what you're saying is an absolute insult to the American public's intelligence to believe that they buy into the hype and don't have thoughtfulness enough to look at the core events here.
Well, just to wait until some evidence is released. That's what I was hoping would happen. Analyze that, and then base your feelings on what might have happened from witness statements and from the lie detector test and from the police investigation.
You think people should wait?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
agree. That's the only thing I've ever wanted.
All right. You chose to come here to speak out for the first time. Have I treated you with fairness and equity here?
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, I'm just asking.
I agree.
Absolutely.
100%.
Okay, because I don't want to...
Well, I understand your perspective, and I understand your perspective and everybody else's more than you realize. This is so absolutely heinous and horrible.
Well, you said you wanted to tell the story and get the other side of the story out. You can't do that if I don't ask you what is in people's minds. And so I told you I was going to do that before we started, and I think I've been very true to what I said.
I can't appreciate it enough. Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, we'll be right back. If you would like to purchase a DVD or transcript of your favorite Dr. Phil show, please log on to drphil.com or call 866-4-DR-PHIL. That's 866-437-7445. 866-437-7445. Do you believe that your son violently attacked George Zimmerman?
Absolutely not. Friday on A Powerful Dr. Phil, Trayvon Martin's parents ask the questions they want answered.
I actually think I'm on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
He didn't deserve to die. As a father, you just don't plan to bury your child.
This is not what he would want for you, to be in such pain.
I just want to know how to move on, how to get past the death.
Do me a favor, close your eyes.
Friday.
I want you to know that we reached out to George Zimmerman and his attorney and invited them to be here. They declined and said they had no comment at this time. And let me say, I invite them to participate if they change their mind. I know you've written a book about this, and I have to say, I get the sense that you've written this book to get information out, not to try to make money. I've read the book, and it's very clear to me that it's very factual, and you're trying to get it out. So I'm glad you did.
Thank you. It's available in case they need anything. They need resources afterwards. It's going to be hard for George to ever get a job if ever this is resolved.
Yeah. Well, Mark and Sandra Osterman would like to give everyone in our audience today a copy of their book. It's called Defending Our Friend, the Most Hated Man in America, the George Zimmerman We Know. I think it's either going to make you feel more strongly the way you feel, or it's going to unring some bells. but I think you'll find it interesting. We also have a link on our website if you want to purchase a copy. Now, I know this is a heated topic. I know I'm going to hear from you guys today on Twitter and Facebook and drphil.com, and I will be there hearing what you have to say. Thanks for being here. So long.